How do you get girls like this? How do you get the girls you don't deserve? Everyone tells you you should settle. Be realistic. Be pragmatic. Find a girl who's a 6 out of 10 who'll be loyal to you because you're the best you can get and settle down with her. I rejected those answers. I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I didn't want to settle for what I could get. I didn't want to get my fair share. I wanted more than my fair share. And I chose to embark on a journey to find out how to get the girls I don't deserve. The girls who a guy like me shouldn't be able to get. The beautiful creatures who make heads turn wherever they go. I wanted girls like that, and only girls like that, and I wanted them to worship me. The problem was, how? I'm not a good-looking guy. I wasn't a sports star. I didn't have any friends. I was on the outskirts, the loser, the underdog, the shit-kicking heel. How do I make the most popular girl on campus want me? How do I make the beauty queens and the cheerleaders fight over me? I had to think outside the box.
Victor used the college, used its modern scientific equipment to conduct strange, forbidden experiments.
I began studying mind control, brainwashing, and hypnosis. I locked myself in the library and read everything I could get my hands on about the science of tearing the human mind apart. I analyzed the propaganda techniques of Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. I studied the CIA's top secret mind control program, MK-Ultra. I dissected the personalities of cult leaders like Charles Manson and L. Ron Hubbard to try and identify how these megalomaniacal mind control wizards were able to obliterate the human will and turn thousands of people into their obedient and unquestioning slave robots. And I discovered a system for making any woman I desired absolutely devoted to me. An unholy mind control technique that makes any beautiful woman I pointed towards worship me like a god. Within a month, I'd enjoyed a dozen sexual conquests. Soon, I was dating the most beautiful girl on my college campus, but it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I became addicted to sex and hedonistic pleasures.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Now, Doctor, I'm here to talk to you about a man. Very dangerous, very
The
unstable
scientists
man.
will not be bound by any
Enough,
morality.
Boris. You talk of the people's rights. The people have only those rights which I choose to give them. And that's for their own good, believe me.
Today, I can get laid whenever I walk outside my house. I just have to go up to the girl I like, use this mind control pattern I developed on her, and in less than an hour, she's naked in my bed. And now,
We give it back to you, the people.
this video is the first part of a series about how to make beautiful women worship you using mind control techniques developed by totalitarian governments, cults, and intelligence agencies during the 20th century. Now, before we get into this, I want to warn you here that this video might not be for you, because this is a video about only one thing. This is about how to get the girls you don't deserve. How to get the girls who are out of your league, so to speak. Girls who look like this. Girls who are extremely beautiful and have a lot of options. Now, a lot of guys don't actually want girls like this. They'll fap to them, sure, but they don't actually want a smoke show girlfriend. A lot of guys are perfectly happy to just settle for a girl who's roughly as attractive as they are, or a little bit less attractive. So if you're a 6 out of 10, she's a 5 or a 6 herself, and to get a girl on that level, the level you're already at, doesn't require you to do any of the things I'm going to talk about here. You know, you sometimes see comments from guys on videos like these saying stuff like, "It's too much work. Why should I have to do all this just to get a girl?" Well, you don't. You don't have to do any of this. You can settle for whatever type of woman you're currently able to get, and that's fine. Absolutely no one is going to judge you for doing that. So if you're okay with settling, if you're roughly a 5 in looks yourself and you just want a girlfriend who's also a 5, that's fine. And that's not hard to do. It doesn't require a lot of imagination, and it doesn't really require you to think outside the box. But if you're like me, if you're anything like I was, if you've got kind of a chip on your shoulder, if you're like a 5 out of 10 in looks, but you demand that your girlfriend be a 10 out of 10, then this video is for you. Now the question is, how do you get that? How do you bridge that gap? It's almost impossible. And that means that to do it, you need to think very far outside of the box. You need to think about the dynamics in a relationship between men and women in a much deeper way than most men are willing to do. That's what my life's work has been about. I have a body of work now, both in my courses and also now in these YouTube videos, that represents the sum total of everything I've learned about this since setting myself this goal over a decade ago. In other words, to get the most beautiful girls who are way out of my league, and not to get them with money or with with favors, but to have them be genuinely devoted to me. To have these girls be genuinely crazy attracted to me to the point where they're literally ripping my clothes off. And I've done that over and over and over again at this point. And now I'm going to show you how to do it, no matter your looks, money, height, personality, or any other limiting factor. And really, that's what this whole subculture of pickup artistry is actually about, I think. It's not really about how to be a player and go to bed with hundreds of women, because that gets old after a while. The real core, the real esoteric purpose of pickup has always been, how do you get a beautiful girl, a true 10, and how do you have her be completely devoted to you? That's what this has always been about, in my opinion. Everything else is bullshit. How can you get the type of girl who every guy stares at and would kill to have on his arm, and not just have her body, but have her mind, body, and soul? How do you get her completely infatuated with you to the point where she would literally die for you? Because she's a fanatic. She's your number one fan. She's a fully indoctrinated, Kool-Aid drinking, cult level devoted follower of you. And you can get this. I've got it myself half a dozen times at this point, where I not only had a beautiful girlfriend, but I had her total devotion, her total cult-like fanatical loyalty. And this might sound like it's kind of a dark thing to want, or like this is win-lose somehow, but I've come to realize, and I honestly believe, that this is how relationships between men and women are supposed to be. This is what the girl herself actually wants. She wants you to be daddy. She does not want to be equal to you. She wants you to be way above her. She wants you to be an almost mythical, archetypal figure in her life, literally like a god. She wants you to be her hero, not her equal. And above all, she wants leadership. She wants to be led. She doesn't want to have to think. She wants the certainty that comes from following someone who always seems to know exactly what he's doing. And in a few minutes, we'll be saying how this is an exact analogy to why people join cults or follow dictators. So, women want leadership. The problem is that men these days don't give women leadership. Most guys today who are under the age of 40 don't even have words or concepts to understand what leading a woman even is, or what that would even entail. You know, on one hand, you have the mass media telling you women want to be equal, and on the other hand, you have the red pill guys who say that women should submit to their man and be obedient, like in the religions of the ancient world. And I hate to be the one to tell you this, but it's never going to happen. Sorry to be the one to break it to you. The world is too different from what it was when those ancient desert religions were created. Those relationships of dominance and submission between husband and wife were underpinned by coercion and violence implicitly, and that is never, ever coming back, at least not in the West. That's over. Those days are done. And so all those old religious-based models of how relations between men and women are supposed to look are just never going to work. The fundamental conditions now are just too different. It's like trying to win a 21st century war with medieval technology. It's like if the Ukrainians started attacking the Russian army with f***ing catapults and siege engines, or charging into them with knights in suits of armor. It doesn't work. It used to work, but those days are over. Like siege engines and chainmail, the old traditional ways of relating to women are never, ever coming back. Things change and you've got to change with them. The past is never coming back. You are never returning to tradition. It's done. You must embrace futurism. I am here from the future, and I'm here to bring you the future of game, the future of male-female dynamics. And that is a future that is based on power and postmodern theory and the scientific study of mind control, brainwashing and propaganda, and psychological warfare, modern media theory and public relations techniques. And I am here to tell you that the future is totalitarian, and it is seeped through with black magic and occult power. It has to do with how the human mind can be programmed and controlled using the magical power of words. It's about how you can cast spells on women with your words using certain magical incantations called frames. And I'm here to reveal a secret: that the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century were occult regimes. That the system we live under today is also an occult regime. Meaning that these regimes were and are based on magical principles. The idea that man can create his own reality. He can will a new reality into existence through sheer force of personality. Man does not have to submit to the truth. He can not only bend the truth, but he can bend reality itself to his will. A man can lie, and if he does it stubbornly enough and with enough conviction, he can will his lie into becoming true. That's magic, and that's what governments do. That's what Stalin did, that's what Hitler did, that's what our government today does. They lie, they tell us what they want to be true, and in some cases, by speaking it into existence, by willing it into reality hard enough, they can actually make their lie become true. And as I said, these are fundamentally magical principles. They're occult principles. They're not based on science. They're based on something way, way beyond science. Something much higher than it and which cannot be studied in laboratory conditions. As most people know, modern techniques of propaganda were virtually invented in Nazi Germany. And of course, Nazi Germany itself was shot through with occultism. It was fundamentally an occult project, the entire thing. Hitler was a seer and a mystic who claimed he was possessed by an ancient Aryan demon or spirit. And our government today, by which I mean the global government that is still in the process of forming and crystallizing, many have accused them of being totalitarian. And they are also driven by a vision, by an irrational and passionate vision of a sort of utopia they want to create. A brotherhood of man where everyone on earth will be made equal.
Yes, make them all equal. Indeed.
It's a fundamentally mystical vision of something that isn't real. They are seeing something that isn't there, that has never existed before, that probably never will exist. But what they are motivated by, above all, is to will that magical vision into reality, to will that utopian world of complete equality into existence by any means necessary. Now, you can agree or disagree about whether that's a good aim or not. I personally think there's a lot of problems with it. But what they're doing at a high level is they are engaging in magic. They're trying to will a new reality into existence. They're trying to will a mystical lie about the future into becoming true. And again, although I don't agree with their vision of the future, we can actually learn a great deal of very useful, practical information about how mind control and magic works from studying our own governments in the present day. And ultimately, as a man who wants to succeed in life and succeed with women, this is what you have to do. You have to become a totalitarian state in your own context. You have to run your brain like a totalitarian dictatorship. And you have to use the techniques of propaganda and brainwashing, which totalitarian governments mastered, to influence the people you need to influence in order to bring your desired vision into reality, to accomplish your magical will. And so that is what this video and this series of videos is going to be about. Today, we're going to be covering what are the occult mechanics of how totalitarian regimes operate, how they manipulate public opinion, how they create truth, how they control and brainwash the minds of the masses to make them obedient and make them comply to their will so the regime can will their desired vision of the future into reality. And the main point here is that this is fundamentally analogous to exactly what you have to do as a man to make your life exceptional, to live a life completely on your own terms, to do your will, to get what you want in this world, to get the girls you want, the money you want, the homes and cars and clothes you want. Whether you want to swoop 100 girls or find one perfect woman and have a family, or even to get harems of girls, whatever it is you want, whatever your will is, what I'm going to suggest to you is that the only way you're ever going to get this is that you must become the dictator of your own reality. You must become the dictator of your reality, and you also must become the dictator of her reality. Assuming you want a girl and you want her to love you and be completely devoted to you to the point of practically worshiping you. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, first of all, let's start at the very beginning and ask the question, what actually is a totalitarian state? What are the characteristics of the total state? Now, Wikipedia's definition, as they put it, is totalitarianism is a political system that prohibits opposition political parties and outlaws political opposition to the state. It's a system in which all power is held by a dictator who controls the national politics and the people with continual propaganda campaigns broadcast through mass media. It features a charismatic dictator and a fixed worldview. Now, it goes on to mention that one of the main differences between a totalitarian regime and a merely authoritarian state is that the total state wants to change the world and it wants to change human nature. So in other words, normal governments just want passive compliance. They're happy enough if people simply obey the laws and pay their taxes. But a totalitarian state is much more ambitious. It wants to control how people think and what they believe, which is why we refer to it as the total state. It wants total control. Not just over what people do, but over their internal life, their internal thoughts and emotions. And this all sounds rather sinister, and obviously we may have different ideas about how society should be run in a perfect world. But what I'm going to suggest to you is that this model of the totalitarian state and how power actually works in the world we have is the perfect analogy for how you've got to be as a man, for how you've got to run your own mind. You've got to be the dictator of your own reality. You've got to take on a mindset and a mental framework of my reality, my rules. For example, what does it mean to outlaw all opposition to the state? On an internal level, that means you've got to outlaw all limiting beliefs, limiting thoughts, limiting emotions, limiting opinions, anything that works against your own success in achieving your mission. You need to have a zero tolerance policy against your own excuses, rationalizations, and limiting beliefs. Or take this line, all power is held by a dictator. What does that mean? It means that inside you, all power is held by the will. And your will controls your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your body, and your actions. Nothing is allowed to happen without the dictator willing it to happen. And whatever the dictator says is law. Meaning, if your will has decided you need to do a thing, like go to the gym or approach a girl or stay late at work, you do it. Your mind obeys your will, and your body obeys your mind. There is no other motherfucking option. It's exactly like living under a dictator. Like if Stalin tells you to do something, if he asks you for a favor, you don't get to say no. When the will wants something done, the mind and the body obeys unquestioningly. No excuses. Total obedience. Obedience is the chief and cardinal virtue. Obedience first and foremost to your own will. You know, a lot of guys these days, they say they want their girl to be obedient to them, but they're not even obedient to themselves. Their body doesn't obey their own will. They're fat, they're soft, they're undisciplined, they're broke because they don't take risks, they don't take action because they're scared. Now, why the should a girl obey you when you don't even obey you? It's never going to happen. Either make your body the slave of your will, or you need to lower your expectations from women. The body must be made the slave of the mind. And the mind, the thoughts and emotions, have to be made the slave of the will. That is how you achieve great things. That is how you bend reality and nature to your will. It starts with bending yourself to your will. And that is how you get things in this life that you were never supposed to have. You know, I'm sitting here right now in a luxury apartment in the center of a major city. I'm 11 stories up. I'm overlooking water. I'm overlooking mountains. And I have a business I started from scratch, which prints money while I sleep. Now, I wasn't supposed to have any of this. This wasn't my destiny. I'm not an entrepreneurial type. My whole family are academics and artists. They know nothing about money, nothing about business. I'm the type of person who's supposed to be an obscure college professor or something, making 40 grand a year and living in borderline poverty. But I forced reality to bend to my will. And the way I did it, and what you need to do if you want to live life on your terms, not just settling for whatever shitty little ration you're given, you've got to understand this diagram right here. This diagram is the key to everything. This is what magic is about. This is what all occult and mystical doctrines are about. And it's about what we call reversing the arrow of causality. Now, in a normal man, a man who they call in occultism a sleep or a machine, and a normal person who we see around us every day, the arrow of causality goes from right to left, like this. Your environment and external world here controls your body. For example, let's say you see a pretty girl, she's part of your external world, your external environment, and first you feel attraction to her, but then you get nervous, your body gets flooded with stress hormones like cortisol, your heart starts beating faster, your mouth goes dry, and so the environment here, the girl, has caused a reaction in your body. Now, this physiological reaction of being nervous in your body then influences your mind, your thoughts and emotions. It influences the emotions first by making you feel panic or fear. The emotion of fear then controls your thoughts, which then come up with reasons to justify not approaching her, to come up with excuses and rationalizations. Oh, she's not that hot. She looks like she doesn't want to be bothered right now. You know, I wouldn't date a girl like that. She has a tattoo. You know, I disapprove of that. Like, as if you wouldn't bang a girl who's naked in front of you just because she had a little tattoo. And then your will, in this example, doesn't really exist. It's basically negative or passive. There's no permanent will there. There are only multiple contradictory wills which change depending on external factors. When you're sitting at home alone, you might have a will to approach a girl, but when you're actually out and you see that girl, now you have a very different will. You have a will to not approach her, to do anything but approach her. Now, obviously, I'm just giving you the example of approaching and approach anxiety because it's one that, as men, we're all very familiar with, but this applies to everything in life. This is how everything, without exception, happens. This is why everyone you see, everyone you've ever met, does what they do. no exceptions. We are slaves to our external environment and we can't do anything. I talked about this at length in my video about how to get the aura that attracts women and the secret of occult magnetism. You can check that out later. It's a very, very important companion piece to this video. But the point here is being the dictator, running your mind like a totalitarian state, is the exact same thing as what has been written about for thousands of years in ancient religious and occult texts. It's about reversing this arrow of causality so that things flow in the opposite direction. As you can see at the top, we have your magical will. This is what Aleister Crowley called true will. This is your true self, your consciousness, your I, ego. I just called it here your will. Now, your will wants certain things in this world. It has a project of what it wants to achieve and experience in this incarnation. It has a vision of what it wants to get. For most of us, this involves material success of some kind, money, girls, doing work that you love, not being a slave to a boss or 9 to 5. That was a big one for me. It could be getting lots of girls or getting one girl and having a family. But the point is, what we're trying to do here, what self-perfection means, what the occult knowledge of the great work is all about, is reversing this line of causality so that the mind will obey the will and the body, the actions you take in life, will obey the mind. This then allows you to control external reality and to shape external reality in accordance with your will. That's what magic is. That is the definition of magic. And the metaphor for this again is the dictator controlling the state. And one way you can view this is the will is the dictator, whether it's Stalin or Hitler or Ayatollah Khomeini or whoever. The mind is the government and the inner party. This includes what people would today call the deep state, the intelligence agencies, the media, the security services. Then the body is the people of the nation, or it's at least those people who the state needs to mobilize into taking some kind of action, such as soldiers, government functionaries, journalists, housewives. And the external world is the world on which the regime acts. It might be another country who it wants to annex, or it might be the masses of people who the state doesn't necessarily require to do anything, but who it does require obedience from, and in whom it wants to inspire respect and awe. In this example, this would refer to the women you're trying to date. So that's the basic model here. But where this metaphor starts to get really interesting is, you have to ask yourself, how does a dictator control the people? How do states manipulate the masses to do what they want them to do, both in history and in our own time? Well, they do it through propaganda. That is to say, through a form of hypnosis. They have a certain ideology and certain messages and slogans and symbols which support that ideology, and they basically just repeat those slogans and symbols over and over and over again until people eventually believe in it and accept that this is the way it is. This is the truth. This is right. This is good. Which the people, by the way, always do, because the people are fundamentally passive. And so what I'm saying here is that this is actually what you've got to do to yourself. You've got to hypnotize yourself. You've got to violate your own mind and use continuous propaganda on yourself. You've got to use self-hypnosis to make your body and your mind obey what your will has decided to do. And this works exactly like government propaganda. It's exactly like how brainwashing happens through the media. Because the thing is, there is no objective reality. Our reality is filtered for us by our brains. Perception is reality. This is what governments and the media understand, and this is why they go to such great lengths to control perception. Because if you control perception, you control reality. Now, I talked about this in a previous video in relation to the idea of attracting women even if you're not good looking or rich. And one guy in the comments gave me some pushback on this that was pretty interesting. As he said, the truth isn't whatever you make of it. The Soviet Union thought that all truth is subjective and up to what they believe is true. And it came back to bite them when the Chernobyl reactor blew up right in their faces. That is because truth isn't whatever the most powerful body of power says it is. Truth is objective, and the truth is that women care about your looks, and genetics will make you undesirable. You can ignore that truth temporarily, but it will blow up in your face. Now, he's right when we're talking about physics, inanimate matter, inanimate objects. In physics, including nuclear physics, there is an objective truth, and what people think about it doesn't change it. But in anything that involves human beings, the truth is subjective because the truth is reflexive. Meaning, how people think about something, what they believe about it, controls the actions they take in the real world. And those actions then have real objective consequences. So an example is the idea that I'm sexy and women like me, versus the belief expressed by this guy that I'm undesirable to women because of my looks and genetics, which can't be changed. Now, I want you to imagine that you take two men who are identical twins. They look exactly the same. But now imagine you kidnap these two guys and you put them into an MK Ultra CIA brainwashing Clockwork Orange chamber, and one of these twins, you brainwashed him and hypnotized him and battered his subconscious with the message that you are ugly and women don't like you because of your looks. And let's say you really hammer that into him repeatedly over the course of many weeks. But then the other twin, you do the opposite. You hammer him with the message, you are sexy and women love you. Wherever you go, women are constantly checking you out and approaching you. Women want to get you into bed. They can't resist you because you're so sexy. And again, imagine you really hammered him with this. Days and days of this programming. You could even have an AI which creates movies showing each of these guys videos of themselves. You know, one twin sees movies of him being rejected by women and mocked and laughed at. The other twin sees movies 24 hours a day of him being surrounded by beautiful women, women telling him they love him, tearing his clothes off. Now, this idiot in my comments thinks that wouldn't make a difference because they're identical twins. It's all just looks and genetics, right? Therefore, those two twins have been programmed in completely opposite ways. They're going to get the same results with women after that, right? Wrong. You are brain dead if you think they're going to get the same results. Those two men who you put into that mind control chamber are going to come out with completely different personalities. The guy you brainwashed to believe that he's ugly is going to be permanently crippled in his relations with women. Forever. He's never coming back. It's over for him. But the other guy who, remember, has the exact same looks, that guy who you put through massive brainwashing and essentially brain damaged him into believing and feeling certain that I am sexy, that guy is never going to be the same with women again. Guaranteed. He's walking out of there feeling like a rock star. And women will react to that confidence by being attracted to him. You are delusional if you think they won't. And by the way, this isn't theoretical. You know, the CIA actually did this shit to people. They wiped their memories clean. They reprogrammed their personalities completely. You can program a human like they're a computer. And the terrifying fact of the matter is that it has actually been done. And so this is what I mean when I say that there is no objective reality. Reality is malleable. Truth is subjective. And you can bend the truth to your will. Because where human psychology and therefore human action is concerned, you can make truth. And what I've been telling you motherfuckers and preaching from the rooftops ever since I started this channel is you need to be your own MK Ultra CIA brainwashing program. Get it? You know, like, it would be really nice if the CIA themselves could kidnap us and hypnotize us for 7 days straight to believe that I'm sexy, right? Well, unfortunately, the CIA is busy with other things, so we can't rely on them to do this to us or for us. We've got to do it to ourselves. And that is what being the dictator means. It means brainwashing yourself to feel and believe that you are sexy, that you are universally loved by women, that women bow down to you and they worship you, that everywhere you go, you can't escape women trying to hit on you, chase you, flirt with you, and get you into bed. The whole key is getting yourself to feel like this is true. You know, you don't necessarily need to believe it, but the key is getting yourself to feel like you would if it were true. And when you've got that feeling, you can do anything. Approaching becomes easy and fun. Women are friendly to you instead of hostile. And girls actually do start chasing you and begging you for sex. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But it all starts in here. It starts in your own mind first. It starts with self-programming, self-propaganda, self-brainwashing. That's the key to all of this. That is the key to making women worship you. So now I'm going to show you 5 ways to do this. 5 techniques of self-programming that give you bulletproof self-belief and confidence with women and in life. So the methods of programming are: number 1, visualization. Number 2, the swish pattern. Number 3, self-propaganda through affirmations. Number 4, self-propaganda through self-talk, or what I call self-commands. And number 5, semen retention. All right, so the first of these, and the most important by far, is visualization, or what is today sometimes called manifestation. This technique traces its way back to about 2,000 years ago when it was first introduced by a learned rabbi, a great magician and wizard called Yeshua ben Yosef, better known these days as Jesus of Nazareth. Now, Yeshua put it this way: whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. What he didn't explain so well, or what at any rate wasn't recorded, is how to believe you have already received the thing you want, despite the fact that you don't have it yet. Because as you may have noticed, belief is not something we can change so easily. You can't just get yourself to believe you're sexy and thin if every time you look in the mirror you see you've got a pot belly. And so what we can do to generate the state of belief and feeling as if we already have what we want is to visualize it. So here are the simple steps to do this. Step 1, have a clear idea of what you want. If it's money, know the exact dollar amount. If it's a girl, know exactly how she looks, smells, feels, tastes, etc. Step 2 is to imagine how you will feel when you have that thing. And step 3, now put together a scene in your mind which implies you already have the thing you want. So those are the simple steps to visualization. I recommend you save those steps as a screenshot in your phone so you can refer back to this. And what you want to do is run through that process every night in bed right before going to sleep. Have a clear idea of what you want. Imagine how you'll feel once you have it. That is the most important part. Then create a scene or movie in your mind which implies you have already accomplished the thing you want. You can imagine yourself in the first person or you can imagine yourself in the third person. Personally, I find that when it comes to manifesting a girl, for example, creating a movie in your mind where it's like you are watching yourself with this girl as an external observer is generally the best. That can be very, very powerful. So in other words, you can see it through your own eyes, e.g. imagine you're laying there in bed and you can see her and feel her laying there beside you. Or you can create a disassociated image so you see the scene in third person. So it's like you're watching this couple, you and the girl, as an external observer who's outside the action. And I find that one is very, very powerful because you're seeing yourself as you are with all your flaws, and yet you're watching, quote unquote, this beautiful girl doting on you and loving you. And I think that changes your self-image on a very, very deep level. But experiment around with both. Use both first person and third person visualizations and see which one gives you the better feeling. And again, I want you to really think about this in the context of the MK Ultra mind control program, or, the movie Clockwork Orange. Like, if you were strapped down and forced to watch AI created movies of yourself getting all these girls, getting everything you wanted, that would change you. It would reprogram you to be confident, and it does reprogram you. That's why I'm saying you need to do this. That's why Jesus himself said this is the key to getting whatever you want. Now, his words, not mine, whatever you want. Believe and feel and see that you have received it, and it will be yours. That's the gospel truth, and it works. This actually works. You don't need faith. You just need to do it, and you'll see. All right, so that's the primary form of visualization you can do. And again, that's something you want to do in bed before going to sleep each night. But there's another technique of visualization, and this one was what personally changed everything for me in terms of being able to approach women without fear, without approach anxiety. And this is what's known as the swish pattern. Now, this one you don't need to do every night, but it is something I'd recommend you do right before going out to approach women. So if you go out to approach women on a Saturday night, you want to do this about 20 minutes before you leave the house. Now, the swish pattern is an advanced technique of visualization, which I originally learned in Tony Robbins' book, Unlimited Power. He in turn got it from neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and as I traced the origins of this back further and further, I came to learn that they actually got this from the CIA's MK Ultra mind control program. Because what the swish pattern is fundamentally about is implanting new memories in yourself. Implanting new memories. And this was actually the essence of what the CIA psychologists were doing during the MK Ultra mind control experiments.
This is the story of a 30-year search by U.S. intelligence agencies to perfect mind control. Some of those engaged in that search have agreed to talk about it for the first time. One said, "I think every last one of us felt sorry to attempt this kind of thing. We knew we were crossing the line."
You can create memories that never were. And if you create memories that never existed, then you're creating an aspect of behavior that is now implanted. In other words, what I'm saying is that you can implant memories. Memories are potent sources of motivated behavior. If you implant enough memories of specific kinds, you can shape and change the nature of human thinking and feelings.
He was really using it to try and change the fundamental function of the individual, to alter their past memories, their past ways of behaving, to just sort of erase everything from their past so that you then had a slate in which you could record new ways of behavior.
In other words, if you can implant false memories into a person as if they're real, you can completely control how they feel about reality and how they perceive reality. And the CIA quite literally destroyed people's minds doing this, but you can use the same principle for good, and you can use it to make yourself powerful and charismatic and attractive. And above all, you can use this to remove your approach anxiety, to completely annihilate your fear of approaching women once and for all. So how do you do this? So first off, sit down somewhere quiet and close your eyes. Now imagine a situation in which you're going to approach women. You know, if I'm about to go out to a certain bar, I imagine I'm standing in that bar. I make it as vivid as possible. I try to really feel and see myself there. Then imagine you see that girl you want to approach, but you can't do it. You're scared, or maybe you just feel apathetic, like you don't care. Whatever is the unresourceful emotional state you tend to feel in that situation, feel it now. Make it as vivid as possible. Okay, so that's step one. Now that you've created that mental image of the behavior you want to change, put that aside for a second. Open your eyes again briefly to break the state, then close them again. Now this time, imagine yourself in the same situation, but this time, imagine you're looking at yourself from the third person. So it's like you're watching yourself as if in a movie, and you're an external observer here, watching you. Got that? The first time around with the negative image, you were seeing it as if through your own eyes, but now with the positive image, you're looking at yourself through someone else's eyes. And in this positive mental movie, imagine yourself behaving exactly how you want to. You approach the girl with absolute confidence and see yourself as handsome, attractive, in control, immaculately dressed, and now watch as the girl responds exactly how you want her to respond. So you see this idealized version of you approach her, and not only does she love you right away, but maybe she's even immediately touching you, trying to kiss you, telling you you're hot, you're sexy. It's important to make this image of success highly desirable. The more exaggerated it is, the better. Don't be limited by what's realistic here. Really go wild. Okay, so you're sitting down and you've now created these two different mental movies in your mind. One where you're feeling approach anxiety, and one where you're approaching the girl successfully and everything is going better than you could ever have hoped. And now the third step is we want to switch these. And the way you do that is, first off, you're sitting somewhere quietly and you imagine movie one, the negative behavior. You imagine yourself in the first person and you're looking at that girl you want to approach and you can't do it. So feel that fully, make that emotion as real as possible. So that's on the main screen of your mind. But then below that, you have the second movie, the success movie, that's down in the bottom left corner of the screen. And now make it so that movie two explodes onto the screen in your mind in full color and movie one disappears. And while you do this, say whoosh. Actually say that out loud. Make a little noise like that. Now, I know it seems silly, but it's actually important to send a real physical signal to your nervous system while you do this. So you imagine movie one of approach anxiety, make it vivid in your mind, feel the fear or the apathy, whatever it is, then whoosh. Suddenly it's replaced by movie two, where you watch yourself confidently approach the girl and she loves you right away. Now doing this should only take about a second or as long as it takes you to say whoosh. And that's one rep of this exercise. The key to this is repetition and speed. Repeat this about 7 times or however many times you want. And when you go out after doing this, I guarantee you will be able to approach. This completely reprograms your mind. It's amazing that this works, but it does. Personally, I thought it was the dumbest thing ever when I first came across it. But when I actually tried this, the very first night I approached tons of girls, I got a make out at the bar, and then I got laid. And this was after a long dry spell where something like that virtually never happened to me. It's very, very strange. Interesting enough, that word dry spell, where we say a guy is going through a dry spell of not getting laid, where does that come from? It comes from a dry spell in weather where there's been no rain for a long time as the plants are dying. But consider that term, dry spell, as in a spell like a magic spell. Funny enough, there's a great deal of truth in saying that guys who can't get laid have had a spell cast on them to make them fail. Now, how do you get rid of the spell? You can only get rid of it using a different spell. And you do this with the magic of the swish pattern. This is a way of casting a spell on yourself. A spell that makes you approach women and enjoy approaching women as opposed to fearing it and hating it. Okay, the next two forms of self-programming to make women worship you are what are called affirmations and self-talk, or what I prefer to call self-commands. These are two different techniques, but I'm going to cover them together to save time because they're very similar. So again, we have said here that you can program yourself like a computer. You can program yourself to be confident, dominant, charismatic. You can program yourself to have superhuman willpower and force of personality. And so far, I've given you 2 ways to do that using visualization. But you can also program yourself using the power of the tongue, the magical power of words. As Freud said, words were originally magic. And to this day, words have retained much of their ancient magical power. When you say things, you are literally casting spells on yourself to make those things reality. This happens for good and for bad. But the way you can take dictatorial control over this process is with affirmations and self-talk, self-commands. Now, these ideas have become very cheesy, very corny. They've gotten overused and become quite meaningless at this point. And for that reason, I myself was never interested in things like affirmations for a long time. What changed my mind on that, however, is that I was sick one week with nothing to do, and I went down a rabbit hole of reading about L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. Some have called him a cult leader. For legal reasons, I would never say that Scientology is a cult. But if it was a cult, then Hubbard was arguably one of the most successful cult leaders of all time. And Hubbard is very interesting if you want to learn how to be charismatic, and especially if you want to learn about mind control, making people worship you, making women adore you, even if you're not good looking. You cannot go wrong studying L. Ron Hubbard. He is a great, great example of the dictator type of man I'm talking about, a man who literally bends reality to his will and who makes truth. Obviously, he was extremely charismatic, despite not being good looking or very physically impressive at all. He inspired cult-like devotion in millions of people.
These are the times now, people. So what do you say? We need to clean this place up? Huh? Yeah! Okay. To LRH.
And what most people don't realize is Hubbard was actually a student of all this stuff we've been talking about. He was a student of magic. He was a student of the occult. He was deeply involved in the occult throughout his life. He read Aleister Crowley's work at a young age. Hubbard was a close friend of Jack Parsons, another associate of Crowley's. Parsons was a black magician and rocket scientist who was a big part of creating what later went on to become NASA. And Hubbard and Parsons did various magical rituals together in the desert with the intention of summoning a goddess, or demon depending on your opinion, called Babylon. Now, I'm not here to endorse Hubbard, or to condemn him for that matter. However, it is absolutely incontrovertible that this guy had off-the-charts charisma. He was able to completely mesmerize people. He created this massive organization of Scientology from nothing. He went from being dirt broke and a complete nobody to being vastly wealthy. I mean, the guy was virtually superhuman. A deeply flawed man, obviously. But if you just look at the raw facts of his life, he's like the embodiment of Nietzsche's idea of the Superman. So again, like these dictators, Hubbard may not have been such a good guy, but he was clearly highly effective. And when you read about Hubbard, you have to ask, how did he do all this? Why was he so effective and persuasive? And the key to this, in my opinion, comes down to two things. First off, Hubbard was a master hypnotist. He was very, very good at hypnotizing people and at what's now called hypnotherapy. You see this in the movie, which is loosely based on his life, called The Master with Philip Seymour Hoffman, which I highly recommend watching. Great movie. But the second key to Hubbard's charisma is actually what we've been talking about. It's self-programming, self-brainwashing. And this was a big aha moment for me when I went down this rabbit hole, because it turns out Hubbard actually wrote a document in the 1940s. It was titled The Affirmations. Now, it's very controversial in Scientology to talk about this document, but the church itself actually admits that he wrote it because they claim ownership of it. And as Wikipedia says, this document seems to have been intended to be used by Hubbard as a form of self-hypnosis. So this was L. Ron Hubbard writing his own affirmations for what he wanted to be true and to will into reality, just like we've been talking about. Wikipedia goes on to say, many suggestions encourage Hubbard to believe in his own occult powers. So for example, some of the affirmations Hubbard wrote for himself include that I believe in my gods and spiritual things, that my magical work is powerful and effective. You are psychic. You understand all the workings of the minds of humans around you, for you are a doctor of minds, bodies, and influences. Some other affirmations he wrote for himself are, material things are yours for the asking. Men are your slaves. You will make fortunes writing. Money will flood upon you. Your psychology is advanced and true and wonderful. It hypnotizes people. It predicts their emotions, for you are their ruler. And this worked. You know, you need to bear in mind, Hubbard wrote these in the 1940s when he was a nobody. He was poor and broke and struggling, much like many of the people watching this right now might be. Well, he wrote down these affirmations for himself. He programmed himself to believe what he wanted to be reality, and all this came true. He went on to write Dianetics and create Scientology. Money did flood upon him. He did make fortunes writing. He became rich and famous, and people did become hypnotized by him and want him to be their ruler. All of this happened. It's a matter of historical record. And it happened, most people don't realize, because Hubbard had actually studied magic and he knew how to apply it. He had studied Crowley's work in depth. But funny enough, Hubbard arguably had a better understanding of magic than Crowley himself did, if we just go by results, because Crowley wanted all these same things. He wanted riches and fame and so on, but he didn't achieve them. He died in poverty, basically, but Hubbard did achieve all these things. And my point is that he did this through self-programming, affirmations, self-talk, self-commands, telling himself what he wanted to be true as a way of willing that into being true, forcing himself and violating his own reality to make himself believe in a reality which he couldn't see. Because once he believed in that, it became possible to convince other people of that and thus change objective reality to conform to his will. And that's magic. That is the textbook definition of magic according to Crowley himself. Magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a perfect example of the core theme, the core thesis I've been trying to get across in this video, and which is going to come up again and again throughout this series, which is that as a man, you've got to hypnotize yourself. See, I believe that was the secret to Hubbard's success. It was also the key to Hitler's success, as we're going to talk about in a second. And it's the same with any of these other dictators and cult leaders, Charles Manson, etc. It wasn't that they were so good at hypnotizing other people, although they were. It was that Hubbard and Hitler and these other super charismatic cult leaders and dictators were highly effective at hypnotizing themselves. And that was actually the secret of what gave them power over others. That is where all the power comes from. It's getting yourself to believe in the reality which you want to be true. You make yourself believe it. You brainwash yourself to believe it like Hubbard did. And then you have a sense of certainty that makes other people believe in it and believe in you. Okay. The fifth and final key for developing the kind of charisma and magnetism of dictators that makes women worship you is semen retention. Now, I've talked about how to do semen retention properly at length in my video on red magic, and I showed that magnetism and charisma is always derived from transmuted sexual energy. As I've said before, you can test this for yourself. Don't masturbate for 4 weeks. Don't look at pornography at all. And if you can do that without slipping up for about 4 weeks, you'll notice that women take a much greater interest in you. They appear to be attracted to you as if by some kind of mysterious force or even force field. I've talked about this at length already, so I'm not going to repeat myself here, but I wanted to quickly bring up this idea of semen retention in relation to Hitler specifically, because it turns out that Hitler appears to have been doing semen retention. And in my opinion, this explains a great deal about how he seemed to access almost supernatural powers of charisma and magnetism. Now, Hitler is obviously a very controversial figure. It should go without saying that I am not endorsing Hitler or saying he was a good guy or anything like that. But you need to look at Hitler like a phenomenon, right? Like, I'm taking the position here of analyzing Hitler like you would analyze a hurricane or a tornado, a force of nature. You know, obviously, if a tornado destroys your home and kills your whole family, that's terrible. But for a meteorologist who wants to understand weather systems and atmospheric science, he has to be able to study that tornado dispassionately without any emotion or moral bias clouding his judgment. So when we talk about the charismatic dictator as an archetype, the cult of personality around the dictator, which is one of the central features of all totalitarian regimes, Hitler is obviously the prime example of this because he was by far the most personally charismatic in terms of how he was able to influence a crowd. You know, Stalin is not famous for his personal charisma. He was a great organizer, but he didn't cast spells on crowds the way that Hitler did. David Bowie once said that Hitler was the first rock star. Very interesting way of thinking about it. And there's clearly something different and very strange going on with Hitler. You can see in his face, in his eyes, he's almost like tapping into or channeling something.
People always fucking want to murder Hitler with their time machine, right? But then I feel if I got back there, I'd be afraid of falling under the spell of his fucking beautiful eyes.
It's true. You
want
oratory, and then be locked in the gaze.
Yeah, and then I join the fucking party,
That's
knowing
his
me.
thing. He gives you his full attention. You're like, whoa, wait a minute, maybe there's something to this guy.
No, but before you ask another serious
Believe
question,
it or not, they're telling us to wrap it up.
So what gave Hitler this charisma and this personal magnetism? Well, one aspect of it, I now believe, was this practice of semen retention. Hitler's closest friend when he was a teenager was a man named August Kubizek. And according to him, and I'm quoting here from Ian Kershaw's biography of Hitler, Hitler avoided contact with women. He was repelled by homosexuality and he refrained from masturbation. Another biography of Hitler by Robert Payne reports, Kubizek says Hitler never masturbated, detested salacious jokes, and spoke about physical purity as though he believed in some higher law. So it appears that Hitler was practicing, in the beginning anyway, the occult art of semen retention and nofap, or what I have called red magic. He was harnessing and transmuting sexual energy for the purposes of acquiring occult power. Power over the crowd and power eventually over the state. Hitler was a magician, he was a wizard, and in my view, this explains a great deal about where Hitler drew his power and charisma from. It also throws light on another interesting and little known fact about Hitler, which I want to remark on here, and this is that Hitler appears to have said that he was possessed by some sort of demon that essentially gave him his powers. There's a story, I've never been able to track down the source, which says that according to Mussolini, Hitler told him that he was, quote, mystically and scientifically convinced of being possessed not by a demon, but by a spirit from Aryan mythological prehistory, which caused Mussolini to feel completely disorientated. Now, did Hitler really say this? As I said, I've never been able to find a valid source. I do believe it might be true, however, because one of the books in Hitler's library, and one of the books Hitler actually underlined and highlighted and made the most notes in, according to this article here, was a book published in 1923 called Magic, History, Theory, and Practice. Now, we know for a fact that Hitler owned this book. We also know that he underlined, marked it heavily, and thus that he must have read it. And the interesting thing about this is that what this book says, the core message of it, is that it says that the demonic, quote unquote, is central to magic. It says that communion with the demon is the most important aspect of magical work. So I don't know if Hitler really told Mussolini that he was possessed by a spirit or a demon, but we do know that Hitler owned a book which he evidently thought highly of, and which specifically talks about how to summon and channel a demon in order to do magic. Another line from the same book, which Hitler himself had underlined, is false images are necessary for the recognition of truth. Very, very interesting in light of everything else we've been saying here. So the occult analysis, the occult read on Nazi Germany, the red magic analysis, when you put all this stuff together, is that Hitler used the occult technique of semen retention, or red magic, to put himself into contact with some kind of entity of the spirit world. Whether a demon, a god, or a spirit is a matter of semantics. This entity then possessed Hitler, giving him his mesmerizing power to control crowds and inspire devotion. It allowed him to achieve a great deal in a very short period of time. He starts off as basically a tramp in Vienna, a starving artist who was rejected from art school. 25 years later, he runs the entire country with an iron fist and stands on the brink of ruling the world. Now, how does that happen? It happens because he was possessed by something. And that's what semen retention does. It makes you a vessel, a conduit for greater forces. Higher forces that can enter into you and act through you. Now, obviously, in the case of Hitler, this didn't end up turning out very well for him and for many other people. And so some people here might ask, well, if semen retention gives you all this charisma and willpower, but it also causes you to get possessed by a demon, isn't that somewhat dangerous? And the answer is, yeah, maybe it is. But you also need to bear in mind here that Hitler was getting injected with methamphetamine nearly every single day during the war. That's very important to remember when you're thinking about Hitler. So from 1942 onwards, he's high on meth nearly continuously. So my answer is that if you don't do meth like Hitler did, I think you'll probably be fine. I mean, I know I'm going out on a limb here, but I think it was probably the meth and not necessarily the nofap or the occult ideas that caused most of the problems with Hitler. Just my personal hunch. All right. So I opened this video by saying that this is a method for getting the girls you don't deserve. The girls who are unattainable, incredibly beautiful. The girls who are out of your league. And what I've given you here are 5 ways to reprogram your own reality in order to make it normal for you to get these girls. And this is the blueprint. This is the format. This is the magical formula for how you get everything you want in life, including the girls you want, and not just the girls, but the type of relationships you want to have with those girls, having them be devoted to you, having them be fanatically loyal to you, and sexually, they're little nymphos who literally can't keep their hands off you. Now, what I'm telling you is that you have to see all these things in your mind's eye first. That's what the Eye of Providence symbol means. You have to make these things real in your own mind first, and only then can you summon it into being in objective reality. So that's the inner game of this. But in the next video, we're going to cover the outer game. How do you project this reality you've created in your mind outwards onto other people, including onto women? We're going to talk specifically about how to cast spells on women with words that make them want you, love you, and chase you, even if you're ugly, broke, fat, bald, or anything else. I'm going to give you a massive cheat sheet of specific magic word spells and examples you can use right away to make any girl feel intensely attracted to you, seek your approval, and chase you down to make you want to bone her. That's coming up in the next video of the series, so stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe right now and hit the bell to get notified when that happens. Now, in the meantime, while you're waiting for that, I have a secret video to show you, which I can't put on YouTube because it's too R-rated. But in this secret video on my own site, I reveal the secret to making girls obsessed with you over text. And this all comes down to a psychological warfare technique I stole from the US military. It's called Mind War, and it was developed by this man here, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who strangely enough not only worked for US military intelligence, he was also a high-level Satanist, practicing black magician, and founder of his own religion called the Temple of Set. And that's not a conspiracy theory. I'm not making up those accusations. Those are things he himself talked about at length publicly, wrote about, had books on. You can read them yourself. Now, many people think Aquino was an evil guy, and that may well be true, but he was also highly intelligent. And he created a form of PSYOP, or psychological operation and mind control, that's still used by the US government to this day. He called it Mind War, although they refer to this as 5G warfare, meaning the 5th generation of warfare. And it turns out one of the core principles that makes this work, which I call predictive programming, is actually the biggest key to turning women on over text and making them fall in love with you at a distance. I explain all that in my video on the next page. Click the link in the description to watch it now. When you do that, you'll see a video which starts off telling the story of a friend and follower of mine, talking about how he used this technique I'm going to show you to get a model girlfriend. And then you'll learn from me directly about how to use this mind control texting technique to get a beautiful woman in your bed tonight. That's all revealed in the video on the next page. Click the link in the description to watch it now. This is the only thing I've ever found that completely eliminates ghosting and flaking. So if you're sick of getting ghosted, left unread, rejected over text, watch that video now before it's taken down. I'll see you over there.